In India, the Indian blue peacock is a universally known bird with a fan-shaped crest. In Assam and other northeastern states and Myanmar is found another species, the golden green peacock. The Indian peacock is not only protected now for being our national bird, but has been protected from time immemorial. The peacock's sight and hearing are very sharp. At night it generally roosts on a lofty tree or even on a roof. At dawn the jungle resounds with its shrill notes. It is very sensitive to its surroundings, especially the weather. A little cold breeze or black rain clouds in the sky is enough to send it into raptures. It is generally the first to detect the presence of any wild animal on the prowl and warns other animals of the forest. It is an omnivorous bird with its main diet consisting of grain, vegetable shoots, insects, lizards and snakes. Like the secretary bird of Africa, the peacock performs a very useful function in keeping the snake population down. The breeding season starts from July and generally the eggs are laid in August. The hen lays the eggs amid dense bushes or on the very low branches well covered with foliage. The clutch varies from 4 to 6 cream-colored eggs and the incubation lasts for 26 days. The young ones of both sexes look alike till they are 2 years of age, when the tail covers of the male bird begin to grow and develop their brilliant splashes of color. A peacock's call is a loud trumpet-like scream. In northern India, the bird is credited with being specially noisy and happy at the approach of rain. Hindu mythology abounds in references to the peacock. In the Bible too, when the Queen of Sheba visits King Solomon, peacocks feather among the gifts she brought to him. Peacocks feature among the gifts she brought to him. When Alexander decided to go back from India, he took with him about 200 live peacocks to delight his people. During the Gupta period, the peacock established itself as the royal bird. Kumara Gupta issued a gold coin which showed on one side himself feeding a peacock with grapes and the other Kartikeya on a peacock. Page number 792. In his edicts, Ashoka said that the slaying of deer and peacock in the wild was an offence. Aurangzeb also ordered a ban on the shooting and killing of peacocks. Everyone has heard of the famous peacock throne of Shah Jahan. The Kushana king of Kanishka also had adopted the figure of a peacock as his personal emblem. Thus, from time immemorial, peacock has drawn the attention of poets, emperors, invaders, warriors for its beauty and grace. It is no doubt one of the most beautiful creatures of the world. 91. Everywhere the common people are on the march. Gone are the days of the tyrant kings and their outraged subjects. Gone are the days when the despots ruled ruthlessly and the common people cursed their faith. Those rulers enjoyed all the good things in life and considered themselves to be destined to rule over others. Power was monopoly for them. Those ruled were deprived of the basic necessities of life. They were not even considered to be human beings. The common people were denied all pleasure and opportunities. We learn from history how the power-hungry rulers oppressed their own people when they demanded the minimum requirements of life. But of late, things have started to take different shape. The common people have started to establish their rights to live and to enjoy like any other human being, much to the displeasure of the ruling class. They feel that they have long been cheated and that God has not sent anyone to rule. Democracy was purged by Plato and Socrates about 2000 years back. But how many countries do actually practice it? The frustration of the oppressed and neglected classes has driven them to the point of no return. They have now woken up much to the discomfort of the ruling class. They have started asking for justice and want to be treated equally. Look at Africa and other Latin American countries. After centuries of slavery and deprivation, they have awakened, and that has led to political as well as socio-economic independence in many cases. Even in India, the downtrodden people have awakened slowly but steadily to establish their rights in the society. Political parties like Naxalites are the outcome of this movement. They are preaching the farmers and poor peasants to snatch away everything from the affluent communities, if necessary, by force. This may not be considered an isolated political extremism, but a legitimate demand of socio-economic independence from the clutches of the ruling class. Everywhere they are on the march and are up in arms. We cannot afford to wait any longer. Let us acknowledge their rights in our society. They are already on the march. Let us accept them as one of us before it is too late. Page number 793. 92. India's contribution to world peace. Ever since independence, India has been following a steady foreign policy of neutrality to promote peace and harmony among the different power blocs of the world. She rightly felt that only peace could accelerate the progress of the millions of downtrodden masses, not only in India but in all the other developing countries also. Hence, she has never supported aggression, whether it was in Korea, the Middle East, Ghana, the Far East, Libya, or in the Southern American countries. It has always been her firm faith that any dispute could be successfully solved by discussions across the table. Use of force could only serve to aggravate the situation. Immediately after the Second World War, the world was divided into two distinct power blocs. During the Korean War, it was justly feared that the dispute was snowballing into a big international crisis which might lead to another war. Trouble was brewing up also in Indochina, Ghana, and in Middle East. When all efforts to stop war failed, India agreed to send her army not to fight but to put an end to fighting. That India never supported aggression was amply proved by the stand she took during the Anglo-French military action during the Suez Crisis. True to her non-aligned status, India also protested against the Soviet military intervention in Poland, Hungary, and in Afghanistan. She intervened in Bangladesh war for purely humanitarian reasons, and even her recent action of sending the IPKF to Sri Lanka is an effort to act as an intermediary between the local government and Tamil minorities. Her action in the Maldives to abort the coup attempt against President Guillaume's regime has also won her kudos from the rest of the world. Thus, India's efforts have all along been to promote the cause of global peace. India's assessment was that if big powers were allowed to decide all international issues, they would not hesitate to flex their political muscles to interfere into the internal matters of smaller and weaker nations. She felt the need for a forum of developing countries similar to her to safeguard the interest of the third world against the bullying of the superpower. During the early 50s, India, Egypt worked together towards this end and thus started the non-aligned movement, an international forum whose member countries, chiefly developing countries, awoke to stick close to each other to promote harmony and mutual cooperation and to keep a constant vigil over the political ambition of the superpowers. India has always followed the Gandhian policy of non-violence. It is heartening to note that in spite of being a nuclear power, India has always sought to harness nuclear technology for the progress of science only and not to threaten unfriendly countries to submission. In fact, she has even offered to share her nuclear technology with any country for peaceful purposes and for individual growth. SAARC is another organization that has come up with the Indian initiative to ensure regional cooperation among the countries of South Asia: India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. This was a bid to preempt concerted attempts by the superpowers to destabilize its strategically important region to further their own interests. SAARC has a pioneering role to play for the peace and prosperity of the neighboring member countries. Thus, India has taken a lead in the third world countries to work for international cooperation and harmony. Her role has gained widespread acceptance and recognition all over. In the years to come, history would bear her contribution to the cause of peace in the world. Page number 794. 93. Alcoholism. The growing malice. With industrialization and consequent changes of the socio-economic structure of our country, alcoholism or addiction to alcohol has started to cast an evil shadow over our society. Drinking of hard liquor has traditionally been associated with the tribes who consumed their homemade brew, generally in festive occasions. From there it came to the industrial townships and coal fields. Now the malice has gradually spread its tentacles to the small towns and the cities all over the country. Its victims are people from all walks of life: professionals, businessmen, industrial workers, government servants, farmers, and even students. According to a WHO report, an estimated 3 million, that is 1 out of every 25 Indian, is an alcohol addict. The traditional taboo against liquor is rapidly vanishing, and the average Indian is drinking more than before. More and more homes now serve hard liquor to their guests. Dry parties are now considered old-fashioned. Traditional festivals are now often an excuse to go on a drinking spree. Salesmen and businessmen prefer to do business over lunch, inevitably followed by drinks. Young people, even girls, consider drinking to be fashionable. Bars, once considered to be exclusive haunt of alcoholics, are now gaining increasing acceptance among common people. It seems we are fast becoming a society of alcoholics. The cinema has played a major role in popularizing the cult of alcoholism amongst its viewers. The tragic hero drowsing his sorrows in a bottle of wine has been romantically glamorized in too many films. The escapism has struck in the mind of the audience. The net result has been that many people, unable to face the harsh realities of life, have hit the bottle as a source of salvation from tension and frustration. Emulating the silver screen hero has been a temptation too difficult for them to resist. It is strange that though prohibition has been there, the states have been extremely lax in enforcing it. New licenses are being issued one after the other by the central government to set up breweries all over India. Consumption has almost doubled over the year and now stands at a whopping 340 million liters. 1985. New brands of liquors are flooding the market, all with official patronage. The annual toll on life has also increased alarmingly. The recent Baroda Hooch tragedy claimed 300 lives. Every now and then, newspapers carry reports of gruesome deaths caused by consumption of illicit, privately brewed liquor. Hundreds of deaths go unreported. In major hospitals and cities, alcoholics now constitute 20 to 30% of the patients in psychiatric ward. Only a few years back, this figure was as low as 2 to 4%. Page number 745. Page number 795. In fact, alcoholism is disease. It attacks the central nervous system of the patient. Apart from the physical harm, it causes, the patient is also wrecked morally and financially. It is also responsible for hooliganism and other antisocial acts. Road accidents due to drunken driving, broken marriages, etc., are a few of the unhappy fallouts of alcoholism. The tragedy is that people realize their folly too late. By then, it becomes impossible for them to abandon their habit. Their addiction eventually leads them to their doom. Unfortunately, though alcoholism and other related problems are increasing alarmingly, the facilities available to treat are awfully inadequate. It is a pity that a various government hospitals all over the country can accommodate only 3,000 patients for treatment. The problem is further compounded by the fact that most of the alcoholics refuse to come for treatment. Different voluntary organizations are now doing service to the nation trying to curb the menace of alcoholism. Organizations like Alcoholic Anonymous are conducting seminar, group discussion, counseling clinic in drive to educate the people about this evil. But the government has to play a more active role. A social awareness has to be created amongst the masses through TV, documentary, film, advertisement. Most importantly, if this menace is to be curbed effectively, prohibition needs to be strictly enforced, even at the cost of displeasing the vested interests. 94. War or peace? What does the future hold for us? The world we live in today presents a spectacle of the horrors of war. We do not seem to have learnt any lesson from the two devastating world wars. They crippled the world economy, maimed and killed millions of people, but the warmongers are still not satisfied. Recent memories like the unnecessary killings in Afghanistan, Bosnia, Chechnya, Sri Lanka and Iraq saddens us. We the common people are horrified by the atrocities committed during these wars. But still nations all over the world go on increasing their defense budget to produce and procure deadlier weapons. Some countries even talk about star wars and are spending billions of dollars to invent more destructive weapons which, if used, are likely to annihilate mankind from the face of earth. Ordinary people do not want war. They have nothing to gain from the wars. They stand to lose much, their property, the lives of near and dear ones. Given a choice, all they want is to live in peace, but the choice is rarely in their own hands. More often than not, wars are results of games the national leaders play among themselves in a bid to establish their authority over other nations. This excuse is national security. Their excuse is national security. In reality, it is nothing but an oft-repeated cliché to hide their selfish ambitions. They resort to rambling, rousing, and brainwash the common man into believing that war is necessary for his own good. The masses are simply tools sacrificed at the altar of their political ambitions. Fortunately, of late, some people seem to have started thinking rationally. The genesis of the movement for peace is the first indication of the growing resistance of people to play puppets in the hands of the warmongers. They are mustering in thousands in anti-war rallies all over the world to create awareness and to promote the cause of brotherly relations among nations. Greenpeace, anti-new car, some of these movements which have gained a lot of popularity support amongst masses. They aim to remove mutual distrust among nations by propagating the message of universal brotherhood. This is the only means of saving the world from the path of self-destruction. It is heartening to note that at long last the superpowers also seem to have realized the dire consequences of nuclear stockpile. After decades of Cold War, the USA and Russia are now keen on nuclear disarmament. In this context, mention above must be made of the pioneering role played by the former president of Russia, Mr. Mikhail Gorbachev, in initiating this process. It is chiefly because of his efforts that the superpowers have embarked on a mission to improve bilateral relations and reduce hostility. All the NATO and the Warsaw Pact countries have also followed suit. The arms reduction talks have led to the dismantling of number of major military installations belonging to the rival camps. This augurs well for the rest of the world, and the prospect of long-term peace indeed seem to be brightening. Hopefully, as long as good sense continues to prevail on earth and disputes amongst nations are sought to be resolved by peaceful negotiations and settlements, the spectre of war need not haunt us anymore. 95. Journalism as a profession. With the spread of education and the subsequent increase in the number of newspapers, journals, periodicals, journalism is a dignified profession associated with collecting, writing and editing of newspaper and journals have come up. This profession was earlier monopolized by a selected few individuals, but now it is being invaded by a host of young, educated and trained people who have given the profession a new dimension with their creative approach. These are the days of information revolution. Hence, journalists, the architects of this new revolution, who are the men behind the newspapers and periodicals, have a very important role to play in any society. Many things are happening all over the world which have a direct or indirect bearing on our lives. Page number 797. It is the duty of the journalist to bring the news from all over the globe to his readers. The improvements in telecommunication system have made his task easier, but still the life of a journalist is hardly a bed of roses. He has to be on his toes all the time, rushing from one place to another, on fair weather or foul, trying to sniff out first-hand news. He must have good contacts with high-ranking government officials, influential businessmen, as well as the dons of the underworld. His profession requires his presence in riot-affected areas, in the front line of war, in the thick of floods or other disasters. All this is tough work. Maybe it is this element of risk that adds a touch of glamour to the profession of journalism. Investigative journalism is another exciting field which has come into prominence in the 70s. The infamous Watergate scandal brought into limelight one of the most celebrated journalists of all, Mr. Jake Anderson of Washington Post. His brilliant expose on the shady dealings of President Mr. Richard Nixon shook the American government and caused his downfall. The Indian press has also had its moment of glory when, as a custodian of public interest, it has exposed the misdeeds of many government and influential people. The Telgi case, the stock market scam, the Bofors, Fairfax scandals have been some of the highlights of the watchdog role played by the Indian press. We can be justly proud of our own Arun Shourie, Kuldeep Nair, M.J. Akbar, Prem Bhasin for having set standards of excellence in investigative journalism. But investigative journalism is not fun all the way. Very often such reporters have incurred the wrath of powerful people and have to pay for it with their lives. Moreover, a scoop is not an everyday affair. It often involves days of grind, toiling round the clock, digging up records, trailing people, chasing false leads before something worthwhile comes up. It requires patience, imagination, enthusiasm. It is evident that journalism requires professional training, a good command over the language, excellent communication skills, a thorough grasp of current affairs, specialization on certain subjects are some of the vital prerequisites of the making of a good reporter. It requires a scientific temper, objective outlook and a spirit of inquiry. Unfortunately, there are only a handful of reputed institutions in India offering standardized good quality courses in journalism. Another alarming trend in today's journalism is yellow journalism. Of all the fundamental rights enshrined in our constitution, that of freedom of speech is perhaps the one which has been most misused. Such defamatory writings are used to settle personal scores and are either grossly exaggerated or have very little truth whatsoever. But the unfortunate victim whose reputation has been damaged rarely gets a redress. He can go in for litigation, but that again is a lengthy process. Mercifully, such instances are few and far between. Page number 798. In the final evaluation, journalism indeed is a rewarding career. It has prestige, glamour, and lot of social responsibility. There is a saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. The powers in the hand of journalists are infinite. They can make or break society, institutions, governments. This is the reason why they must be judicious in exercising their power. 96. Drug addiction or drug menace. Of late, the growing addiction of drug is the greatest concern to mankind. The parents everywhere are anxious. The sociologists are working overtime. The governments have posted special checks at international airports and docks to stop the smuggling of drugs. In fact, it is feared that if no strong measures are undertaken immediately to face the problem, it may be very late or even impossible to save the section of our youth from this death trap. Taking drugs of mild nature like opium ganja is not new in India, but this narcotic addiction took a serious turn with the flooding of LSD during the early parts of the 60s. But before the government and sociologists could understand what was going to happen, still more dangerous and lethal drugs like marijuana, heroin, brown sugar flooded the market. Big international drug racketeers have recently manufactured 1,000 times more effective drugs, plastic-coated heroin. It is said to cut down the longevity of the addicts by 25%. Special syringes are being manufactured to inject these into the bodies of the addicts. Sociologists think that the main reason of taking these drugs is frustration. The youth in general these days do not see much light for their future. A sense of frustration grows in them. They want to escape from reality. Drugs help them to forget their problems. But once they taste it, they find it next to impossible to come out of this dangerous habit. Parental neglect, loneliness, and offer pressure from friends may also lead to drug addiction. There are drug peddlers who pose as vendors and food stuff they lace food stuff with drugs. Thus, many people become addicted to it without even being aware. Drug smuggling also is a multi-billionaire dollar business. The fabulous price of heroin in international market tempts the underworld agents in separate part of the world to risk their necks. In certain countries like Malaysia, Saudi, the peddlers and the addicts are very often sentenced to death. But the criminals behind the racket remain scot-free as the tentacles of the drug agents and tycoons have reached almost all the countries of the world. Drug addiction menace has been ruining the lives of thousands of youths and bringing misery and destruction to hundreds of helpless families. Page number 799. Coordinated and all other measures should be taken by different nations to curb this great menace. Drug peddlers should be heavily punished. Enough funds should be donated by different world bodies to start an all-out war against the international racketeers. Arrangements should be made for proper treatment of the addict with the view of rehabilitating them in society and create in them a sense of self-confidence for living a meaningful life.